So maybe the first thing to mention, and it's I guess obvious to all of you anyway, of course results management is a very important process when you look at elections, when you look at electoral integrity. Nothing can be more damaging to the electoral process than if results are in doubt, if there is a lack of timeliness of results. There's often a lot of tensions, a lot of uncertainty if it takes a very long time to process the results, and of course also if there is a lack of accuracy or a questioning of the accuracy of the results, and of course that can be hugely devastating. So in that sense, I find it very encouraging that Indonesia is spending so much effort on improving results processes on every level, at the level of the KPU, at the level of the Bawaslu, but also at all the civil society initiatives that are happening around results management. Okay, and so what I've prepared now is just some global trends, some global overview of what's happening in results management, and especially in the use of technology, a few statistics, a few examples from countries on 3 different continents, and then maybe also some conclusions that we can draw from this. So I'd like to start by just giving you this global overview of how technology is used around the world by MPs in the result process. A vast majority of election management bodies around the world, so 86% are using technology for the publication of results. So they have usually websites, online opportunities to publish results. So this is what you see in many, many countries already. There is also more than half of the countries, 54% of the countries around the world that use electronic means to transmit and tabulate the results at some stage, but that doesn't always mean that this happens in the polling stations already. So very often it's similar to what you have in Indonesia here as well at the moment, that most of the process begins at the municipal level, at the district level, so not directly at the polling station level. And then 24% of countries are using result transmission already at polling station level. But then even if we look at those 24% that have technologies in polling stations, this is quite a mix. So it can be voting machines, like we'll probably hear from the Philippines in a few minutes. It can be computers, tablets, mobile phones, so relatively modern technology, but it also can still be very low-tech. So there are still a lot of countries that are also using telephone links, so just to call through the results, fax machines, text messages. So simple technologies are also still very much in use for transmitting from polling station. So when you just look overall, so why are countries doing this, then I think it's fair to say that there's 2 things you'd like to achieve with technology. One is you'd like to have the results faster. Technology, of course, has a big potential. The other thing is, though, that you also want to have often a second and additional result channel, so you can compare, you can make sure no mistakes are happening, no manipulation is happening, so you can control one channel with the other. In that respect, it's maybe also important to note that often technology is used to support and not to replace the existing paper process. So even though a lot of those countries have technologies in place, they also have a paper process. First goes the electronic process really fast, and then comes the paper process for auditing, for verifying that the electronic results are correct. So as I mentioned before, I will bring 3 very specific examples from 3 very different regions. The first is here very close by, Pakistan, and I think it's quite interesting because I think the type of technology they're using is very similar to what is in the minds of some Indonesian stakeholders as well. So in 2017, this system was used for the first time in Pakistan, and this is just a quote from the Elections Act of 2017 in Pakistan, where it basically defines that the presiding officer should take a picture of the result sheets as soon as conveniently, or as soon as possible, as soon as connectivity is available, transmit that picture electronically to the next level commission before then sending the original documents that are still on paper on. And so you can see all of this is happening from a mobile phone, from the picture down there, taking a picture of the result form and then sending it on to the next level of election administration. So what's interesting to note about Pakistan is that the presiding officers use their own personal phone for this. Of course, that has a few advantages. It's cheaper for the election administration. You don't have to buy so many devices. But also, when you compare it to other countries, people are used to their own phone. When you look at what sometimes went wrong in other countries, people could not unlock their phone, were not familiar with the system. So it's an interesting idea that they have said presiding officers use their own phone. Basically what they have is just an app that can be downloaded to the mobile phone, and the app will then provide a facility for taking a picture, also for entering the data, for typing in the data in a written format. We'll record the location, the time when this recording was made, and then it will transmit it on. What I have here is the timeline of roughly how long it took them to bring out the system. So for Pakistan, it was about 3 years. It took them from first tests until they finally used it in the elections in 2018. So the process started in October 2015 when they did tests in by-elections, first with 50 polling stations, then increasing the test to 100 polling stations to gain some first experiences. This was then followed by the Elections Act, so the provisions that I showed on the slide before. And then by a first pilot use in a real election, so for real results, in a full constituency in 2007, October 2007, a second pilot in a full constituency for elections in a by-election in January 28. And then only in February 28, they went on full rollout. They contracted a company to do all of the configuration of the devices, all of the training, and all of the preparations that had to be made. It's interesting that Pakistan, of course, is also a huge country, a very big operation, so they also had to train 180,000 poll staff, not as much as Indonesia, but it's at least the same magnitude. And so on the 25th of July 2018, they had their general election with that electronic result system, 106 million voters, 85,000 polling stations, 12,000 candidates. So that's about the size that they ended up doing after 3 years of preparation. So overall, the Election Commission considers this system quite a success, but still they report themselves that they have experienced several challenges as well. Some of them include connectivity issues, that they did not manage to find network connections in all polling stations. They had software and hardware glitches that always have to be expected when you use technology. And one issue for them was also training and making sure that all polling officers are properly trained. They realized not all of them find it easy to handle those devices, so they also experienced some uneven usage of those systems depending on the region, depending on the polling station. The second example I have is from Kenya. Kenya actually used in recent years 2 different types of technologies in polling stations. You've seen pictures of both of them on the screen here. So on the left side you see mobile phones. This was 2013, so relatively simple feature phones with a simple application on them still. On the right hand you see the system that was used in 2017, which looks more like a tablet computer. This is a device that's actually marketed internationally and that has several functions. So it's not only used for result transmission, it is also used for voter registration and for identifying voters biometrically in polling stations. But then at the end of the day, of the election day, it can also be used for transmitting results. So of course, Kenya is interesting because it shows 2 types of technologies that have been used, but it's also an example of how difficult the use of technology can be in an environment that is not fully conducive maybe to democratic developments, that faces a lot of challenges. So here's just a quick timeline of what happened and what is kind of the background of how those result transmission devices have been used in Kenya. So you probably have heard about the 2007-2008 election crisis in Kenya. Hundreds, maybe thousands of people killed, hundreds of thousands of people displaced. The follow-up to this was a commission, the Recapitulation Commission, that looked into all the problems of the electoral process in Kenya, made several recommendations. I'm only focusing on the technology one, but technology was part of the recommendation as well. So the Recapitulation Commission recommended to use technology to avoid manipulation and to create a more credible electoral process. So the Commission made the recommendation in 2009. In 2011, an Election Act just encouraged the EMB, basically said the Election Act said the EMB may use technology as appropriate in the electoral process. That then led to the first system that I've shown you on the screen before on the left-hand side that was rolled out. There was a lot of problems as the systems were being used in the field, so everything from systems just not working, power outages, people not knowing how to use the systems. I'll come to a summary of those later. Leading to a lot of disputes. The election results in the end had to be adjudicated by the Supreme Court as well, but in 2013 the Supreme Court upheld the election results that were in the end produced by the system. As a consequence, in 2016, the Election Act was then amended, was now getting much more detailed about the use of technology, prescribes the use of the various types of technology for the Kenyan elections, and it goes into a lot of details about when technology should be procured and how it should be operationalized. However, in 2017, when the system that was on the right-hand side of the screen before came into use, a very similar story somehow repeated. There were again tech failures. There was even the killing of an IT manager who was responsible for the ICT system of the election administration. A lot of disputes, not only about the technology, but also about the technology, questions, unclarity about what kind of result is valid. Is it the result that comes from the machine? Is it the result that comes from the paper protocols? Again, all of this going to the Constitutional, to the Supreme Court. And in 2017, the Supreme Court actually then annulled the election, not only because of the technology problems, but also because of other shortcomings, irregularities. So I guess by now, it's assumed that the result was actually not that far off the actual result, but just there were too many shortcomings, too many procedures that have not been fulfilled properly, and this is why the Supreme Court annulled the election. And the election had to be repealed a few months later. I think the Kenyan example is just, I mean, I don't want to name and shame a country, it's just interesting because it highlights typical problems that often happen when technology is being introduced. They were pretty much facing all of the classic challenges there. Tight timelines, last minute changes, even in the legal framework, not enough time to implement the project, unexpected delays in procurement, so the procurement takes already a lot longer than you think it would in the plan. You have then less time for testing the system, you don't have enough time for training. The poll stuff that in the end are of course crucial for the successful operation. Connectivity problems, as I mentioned before, even an unclarity amongst stakeholders. What should be the official result? Is it the paper or the electronic result? The rules were actually quite clear, the official result was the paper, but because technology got so much attention, there was a lot of confusion amongst stakeholders about this as well. There was a confusion about the publication of partial results that were not verified yet, and that of course changed as the election progressed. There was even examples of fake news about the technology, so I, with a technical background, found that quite interesting, that one of the contestants was actually posting on Facebook log files that should apparently prove how the result system has been rigged. The log files had nothing to do with the technology that was used by the election administration, but in the heat of the electoral contest, this was just adding to the perception that the system was not trustworthy. Again, this is not only about Kenya, this is really maybe a classical overview of all the things that can happen when things go wrong with elections technology. The last example I have here is about the Netherlands, and I think it's quite interesting because it just shows how close the link between trust, technologies, and how long scars of technology problems can be left behind. The Netherlands have been using an electronic machine that you see on the screen here for 20 years, so from the 1990s to 2007 they had this by now famous NIDAP machine in polling stations. Until 2007, an activist group stepped up and said, well, actually, those machines are probably not secure enough for entrusting them in our electoral process. The election administration for a long time tried to defend those machines, but after about a year of forward and back between this activist group and the election administration, the administration basically had to say, well, it's unsustainable to keep those machines running any longer. We have to switch back to a paper process. The picture where you see this chessboard here is actually where the hackers or those activists demonstrated that the machine can not only be used for voting but also for playing chess, which was one of the legal requirements actually, that a voting machine can only be used for voting. So that was one of the demonstrations of shortcomings. So this problem with the voting machine was 10 years ago. Since then, the Netherlands has been voting with pen and paper, so a very traditional voting process in polling stations. But what they have done is they have used support technology, a system called OSV, only for the electronic results management. So maybe similar also to what is being discussed here. It's basically an online system. Municipalities are entering their results there. They're even printing protocols from this, but they're also using the system for transmitting results. But then all of a sudden we had all of those cybersecurity concerns, especially after the US election in 2016, all of those allegations of possibly hacking attacks against election infrastructure, and all of a sudden a very similar story repeated. There was an activist together with a media outlet back then questioning the reliability of this result system. Again, the result system, the official results came only on paper. This was only used as an additional fast track for getting the results quickly in. And still, questions have been raised. The reliability of some of the algorithms were questioned, turned a big media story, and as a result, the Minister of Interior very quickly all of a sudden decided if there is any doubt in this technology, we cannot use it. And for a short moment, they banned the use of any technology in elections. So all of this happened maybe 10 days before the election. This created a lot of confusion. Election officers then asked, well, can we use calculators? Can we use Excel sheets? Eventually they found a way to patch all of this up. But it just shows even 10 years after the voting machine problems, the election administration was still so worried about the trust in their systems being lost that they were going very fast. When there was any doubt, they felt we have to take all of this technology back. So obviously when we look at all of those problems that I've listed now, of course you can say it's only technical problems. But I think they also hint at something a bit deeper, and that is just that there is a very close relation between the trust that stakeholders have in elections and also what technology can do to this trust. And for this it can actually be interesting to unpack a bit. There is some research in how trust is actually built up, what kind of different levels of trust do exist between institutions and citizens, what makes people trust an institution. And so a few interesting categories there is something called the trust of communication. So the willingness of an institution to communicate with its stakeholders, the willingness to be transparent, the willingness to provide a lot of information. And of course that is something where technology can really help, including also this result technology. There is a competence trust, the trust in the capacity of the institution. And of course, this is where technology can really be very harmful as well. If the implementation of technology creates the impression that the election administration does not know what they're doing, cannot control the technology, is just not able to deliver an election in a credible way, this is where technology can do a lot of harm. Another challenging aspect is also predictability trust. So again, those are concepts that are beyond elections. This is for other institutions as well. If you should trust an institution, you would like to be able to predict how this institution reacts, how the system reacts. If you know how it works, you trust it. If you don't, you don't. And so it's always interesting also to consider with technology, if technology is seen as a game changer, something that really changes the way how elections are being conducted. Of course, this is going to raise questions with stakeholders as well, and if they are not sure what's going to happen, they might already doubt the process just because something revolutionary is coming into the system. An important aspect also when it comes to this communication trust is that this is an example where really both sides of the equation, both the election administration but also the stakeholders, be it civil society, be it the political contestants, have a lot of responsibility. Of course, the election administration has the responsibility to be as transparent as possible, to provide as much information as they can, as much data as they can, but certainly that creates risk as well. Of course, if you provide a lot of data, a few small mistakes will show up as well, and then it's also up to the responsibility of the other stakeholders, of the civil society, of the political parties, to realistically assess those mistakes they're finding. So if you just find minute mistakes, it's probably not a good reason to question the entire conduct of the election. And this is just one of the factors also that shows it takes time to build this kind of trust. It's a give and take, it's a step-by-step procedure. The election commission gives a bit, stakeholders give a bit back, and so over time trust can be created. But bringing technology very fast is always risking some of those levels of trust. And maybe just for completeness sake, I mentioned the final type of trust as well is the trust in character, which has a lot to do with the ethics, with the values of an institution. So of course, in a context where there's big democratic deficits, where stakeholders just don't believe at all that the election administration is willing to deliver a trustworthy election, of course, no matter what you do about the transactional trust, no matter how you get the technicalities right, if there is no trust in the character of an institution, no technology will help to save the integrity of the process. And with this, I'm already coming to my 7 conclusions for e-recap and what I've learned so far about it. I would certainly say do it, go ahead with it. I mean, it's a very important process. Getting results accurate, getting them fast is essential, so please do go ahead. But I would say don't rush it. So take the time you need. A lot of things go wrong with technology if you don't have enough time and if you're running out of time, if you cannot test properly. So testing, again, is very important. Teaching, training stuff is very important. A lot of those things fail because of very simple reasons, because people don't know how to switch on the phone, because people don't know the PIN codes for activating their phone and so on. So training, very important. Verify it. Make sure you have ways of checking what this technology does. So especially in the age of cybersecurity, rumors may just come up, and you will have to explain why you're sure that this technology produced the right result. So make sure you have audit and verification procedures. And when I'm talking about cybersecurity, a lot of this has to do with communication as well. Oftentimes, the hacking itself and the hacking risks themselves are not as bad as the rumors that are being spread about it. So communicating the technology, explaining how it works, explaining how it's secured, countering rumors is also a very important factor. Those would be my 7 conclusions for the way ahead in Indonesia. Thank you.